All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Carolyn Rodriguez. Mishmin Trihis, Kanrikat Carolyn. Thank you, everyone, for being here. I am a Amah Mutsun Tribal member, and I'm going to go ahead and give our land knowledge before we start getting into the event for today. So this is for UC Santa Cruz. The land on which we gather is the unceded territory of the Awashwas-speaking Yupi tribe. The Amah Mutsun Tribal Band, comprised of the descendants of Indigenous peoples taking to Mission Santa Cruz and San Juan Bautista during Spanish colonization of the Central Coast. It is today the tribe is working hard to restore traditional stewardship practices on these lands and heal from historical trauma. And one thing I will say is for land acknowledgements, yes, they're necessary, and we need to make sure that every university specifies the land that they're sitting on. But also I want to challenge everybody to recognize which native land you sit on. And also, how can we move past language, how can we move past land acknowledgements to actually support Indigenous people? Sorry for the background noise. Basically, like, how can we move past land acknowledgements to support Indigenous people with their work that they're doing to revitalize their connection to land, but also protecting sacred sites? And so I challenge you all to take the first step. If you haven't already, you can definitely sign our campaign to protect Eurostock, since the tribe is currently acting to protect our site from a land mining permit. So I guess I'm challenging you all to think past land acknowledgements and to figure out how can you support Indigenous people. So yeah, that's my thinking. And so now I'm going to go ahead and switch gears. So to give a little background of myself, I'm an alumni from UC Santa Cruz. I did my bachelor's there in literature, modern literature, and then I ended up working at UC Santa Cruz in the Educational Opportunity Programs Office for quite some time. But then I decided I want to get my master's degree. I want to get a PhD. So last summer, I completed my master's in American Indian Studies. And now I'm a first-year PhD student in education and social research methodology at UCLA. So I'm excited to be here and to share my knowledge with you all. But also, I'm happy to be here with my community, with tribal members, as we all engage in our conversation today. Tribal members are happy to wave at the screen for right now if they like, but everyone will have a chance to introduce themselves, and everyone will have a chance to, just to speak what they think on the book they're there, right? Since Tommy Orange and his creativity is what's bringing us here tonight. So with that, I'm gonna switch gears to talk about kind of my interpretations of the book. The first thing that I want to point out is that the characters in this book, they were relocated from their traditional lands to Oakland. So in 1956, there was the Indian Relocation Act. So the government itself was trying to dissolve reservations, was trying to, in other words, assimilate and dismantle the reservation system, or more like the tribal nations and their own sovereignty and their rights to their land. And so the whole idea was, let's get them off their land, let's get them in the city. And so in 1956, that's when we saw, like, through the relocation program, a lot of Indigenous people made their way to the cities. And Tommy Orange, the characters that he's sort of focusing on, those are people that relocated in Oakland. And so I'm saying that, so background info, because I feel like that's how Tommy Orange, like, he's telling the stories of Indigenous people, and he's talking about the people that specifically resided in Oakland. And so for me, it's like, okay, that's great, but also recognizing that there are Indigenous communities of the Ohlone people, or the Muwekma or Chochieno, who are Indigenous to Oakland and who are the original caretakers of those lands. And so before I open it up to the other panelists here today, the point that we bring today is that we're going to be talking about things from our perspective, from the Amah Mutsun perspective, the Ohlone perspective. We're engaging with Tommy Orange's work. We're engaging with the characters. We're not the translators for their cultures, but we can share there's overlap in the daily experiences that we share. And so getting specifically to my analysis of Tommy Orange, I really feel like Dean Oxentine is a metaphor for who Tommy Orange is, but why he's doing this work and why he has produced this book. Because with Dean, in the beginning of the book, we learned that he is giving a grant. He's going to get video testimonies from tribal members in the Oakland area because he wants to tell their stories, right? For once, we're focusing on the Indigenous perspective. And so I also feel like that's what Tommy Orange is trying to do. I feel like that's the reason why he's writing this book. And so that's why I feel like Dean is a metaphor for Tommy, although I don't know if Tommy would say that himself. But really thinking about just the work that goes into telling the Indigenous stories. And one more thing that I will share is that with Dean, he gets this idea from his uncle Lucas, and how his uncle is even connected and had a relationship with Opal Viola Victoria Bearshield, who in the end, throughout the story, these characters have their own lives, but yet they're still connected. And so I feel like that the connection that Dean has through Lucas, through Opal, in a way, it's showing Tommy's connection to his Indigenous people and why this is his culture. He grew up in Oakland. And so we're able to learn from his perspective and from his writing of the characters that he's developed. So yeah, I feel like I try to set things up for the next speakers because so then that way I'm going to switch gears and so that way the panelists are going to dive deeper into the characters, into the readings, and to share our thoughts and our perspectives and what we think of the book. So thank you again for being here, and I'm going to pass it over to Lisa Carrier, who's a tribal council member, and Lisa will introduce herself further. So thank you.
Nishmin Truhis, good day. Conra Kat, Lisa Carrier. As Carolyn said, I'm a long-term council member, about, I believe it's 15 to 17 years. I had a year absence. I want to read the quote from Opal that's at the beginning of the book. That I guess you could say like the introduction of each character, where it talks about her quote is, and actually I believe it's Teddy Bear actually saying this, is you got to know the history of your people, how you got to be here. That's all based on what people done to get you here. Us bears, you Indians, we've been through a lot. And the reason that I picked that is that I couldn't really connect with one dominant character. I felt like there were three characters that matched my experience. I'm technically considered an elder in our tribe. I don't have any problem sharing my age. I'm 57. So obviously I grew up in Hayward, in the Bay Area in the 60s and the 70s, which, brought on its own entire flavor that is unique probably to the rest of the country. But there was obviously this very strong, Native community, especially in the Oakland area. So at that time, I guess I felt quite a bit like Orville. I was thirsty for knowledge. But unfortunately, our tribal members and myself specifically, we really were the there, in that here I was in California, just up the road from my tribal lands in Gilroy, Hollister, in that area. And I had no connection. I had no tribal affiliation. I had really no cultural upbringing, and it wasn't my land. But I was the most Native person in terms of being in school, like elementary, junior high school. And so it was extremely confusing and frustrating. I remember growing up, my one thing that I could always say if I was with a group of other Native people was that I was a registered California Indian and I had my number, because it just felt like I had to have something to prove who I was. And so in that sense, I was Edwin also, because I felt uncomfortable claiming something that I couldn't put my arms around. I just knew that I was Native. I knew that I was California Native. I knew that there were traditions in my family that were Native, but we in the Bay Area, part of the Amah Mutsun tribe, we weren't really able or capable of practicing our culture. So as I evolved and became, an adult and started, it's a long journey how I got to where I am now. But when I was first introduced, my interest was basket weaving. And I used to go to Coyote Hills, and I actually interned there in Newark at the regional park. And my interest right away was basket weaving. And I took that up and I started learning that. And I met my cousin, Kitty Nagiri, and she was very involved in language. And we started a language foundation. And from there, it just went, trying to preserving our language and all the other things related to our culture. So when that happened, I feel like I became Opal because I had this knowledge, but with that comes a lot of responsibility, and it takes a lot of reconciliation and understanding about your obligations and responsibility once you have that knowledge, and what do you do with it. And so I think that for me, while I was so frustrated as a young person, I now know that it wasn't my time, and that my purpose and my time was to learn those things a little bit older, probably say my 30s and early 40s, to pass it on to the next generations, which is my obligation. And now the children in our tribe today, they don't wonder who they are. They don't seek a culture that they can't find, and they know who their tribe is. So I know, it was kind of, I'm not going to say it was painful, but while it was extremely confusing and frustrating, I can now accept that because I know I had to go on that journey to be able to offer what I'm capable of offering my tribal people now. So that's how the three people, kind of match for me. Sorry, I just jotted down a lot of notes. I know we wanted to, as a tribe, kind of talk about powwows and how this all, these people are all on this journey to go to the powwow. And I just wanted to make sure that everybody understands that that's just another area that as Ohlone people and California natives, we certainly can relate to powwow. We grew up going to them, but it's not really a part of our culture. We do not dance competitively. We dance in the roundhouse for ceremony or corral outside. And so again, there's that sense of being on the outside looking in terms of all, Native people, and where we as California Indians fit into that, because it's just not something that, of course, there's some people that will dance, but generally when you go to a powwow, we don't have that opportunity unless they have a special night, or they see, but they set aside a certain time to say, we're going to let the, California or whatever tribes are representing, do a special dance or something, actually at their ceremony. Some people will do grand entry, but that's kind of the extent of it for us. So again, that was, something that was just, I guess you'd say, again, that feeling of being an outsider looking in. I know that last night, or I think it was Reina Ramirez talked about the difference and the competition, or maybe the kind of like a two-tiered society of tribes being federally recognized and non-federally recognized. So again, it's that same sense. In California, there's so many tribes that are not even federally recognized. And so we face that same situation of kind of being the outsider looking in, even within, Native people. So one of the biggest challenges that we've had as a tribe in regards to the powwows and that is kind of detoxing our people from that and to our ways, our songs, our dance, and that because for the longest time we didn't necessarily have everything. So our people obviously went and sought, to fill that void, they went to the powwows and different things to feel included. But at the same time, we've been on this journey now to say, but these are our songs, this is our dance, these are the traditions that we do. And that's something you can do socially, but it's not a part of our spirituality and our culture. So just to wrap it up real quick, I've gotten a lot of questions about the ending of the book, the violence, the shooting, and the way everything ended. And I'll just say that I had to read it twice because I just felt deeply saddened that that's how the book ended. And I guess I'm just filled with a bunch of whys. Why did Tommy decide to take that route when he wrote the book? Because there's so much more to us, and I just felt like it kind of lived up to some stereotypes that I feel like we've been fighting to overcome. And it was just an opportunity to tell our story. We don't necessarily get a lot of chances to share who we are and how we live, and that we're just the everyday lives of Native people. And I just felt sad, and I guess I'm just very anxious to hear why he chose that route, because I just feel like it was a missed opportunity. I loved the book, but the ending kind of haunts me. So that's my take. So next is Hannah, right, Carolyn? Next up is Hannah. Everyone's my cousin, but she's my immediate cousin, Hannah.
Thank you, Lisa. Hi, everyone. Good evening. My name is Hannah Moreno. I am a member of the Amah Mutsun tribe and youth group as well. I am also a teacher here in the Bay Area and a longtime resident in the Bay Area as well. I'm kind of like the opposite of Lisa with how she has all of the knowledge and everything right now. I'm at the very beginning of my stage of connecting back with the tribe. So I'm very honored to be here tonight to discuss a little bit of what my thoughts and my connections were to the book. I know throughout the book, they talked a lot about Native identity, and I've connected with some of the characters that were feeling like they didn't really, like, I remember there was a quote in there or something talking about like, how Indian are you if you are this or that, and what do you you have all these like questions, and you're questioning yourself, you're questioning your connection, and it's kind of finding a way for like finding yourself in a way and connecting back with your roots and your family. So I felt very connected with that. Since I'm kind of starting my journey of connecting back with my family and culture as well. So I definitely felt very connected with some of them in local spots as well. Growing up in the Bay Area, I'm like, oh yes, I remember this, or it probably changed from when the setting was that time, but it still is nice to feel like connected to some of the areas. A lot of the book had as well, I know it talked a lot about alcohol and drug use as well. And I remember growing up in my family and very aware of alcohol from a younger age, just it was around. And but I've always known too with my I've always known with my family, and my dad has always told me to like know your limits. And I remember reading that in the book too about, knowing your limits and making sure that, it's not something to mess with, and it runs in the family, and very serious, making sure that it's not something to play around with, or making sure. So I know I was thinking with Calvin Johnson too, how he was at the kind of very beginning, had stayed away from everything, and then got kind of pulled in at the end, and then ended up losing his life. So I can kind of relate to that as well, making that one bad choice, and making a choice and living with the consequences with that. I did want to share a little part. This is more of me personally, as a story, not as a story, but as my own personal experience, and how I kind of related and connected with the book, was with the violence. In the terms in, I am a mass shooting victim as well. So when they had talked about, I wanted to read one of the quotes in the interlude, underneath the apparent death. No, not us. That happens to them. The people on the other side of the screen, the victims, their families. We don't know those people. We don't even know the people who know those people. We're once, twice removed from most of what we see on the other side of the screen, especially that awful man, always a man. We watch and feel the horror, the unbelievable act. For a day, for 2 whole days, a week. We post and click links and like we don't like and repost them, and then it's like it didn't happen. We move on. The next thing comes. And I really related to those things as a victim of mass shooting and gun violence. And it was just very interesting reading through this, which brought a lot of triggers for me personally. But it was very interesting too, at the very beginning of the book, relating it back to my ancestors of the violence that they probably had endured as well, and similar to my experience now living, which is just a very interesting and connection, very on a personal more note on that. But I'm going to go ahead. I did overall really enjoy the book. I had read a little bit of an interview that maybe Tommy will be working on a second book, maybe. So hopefully that story, maybe that is maybe the reason for the ending. I'm not sure, but the ending was definitely challenging to read as well. But I would like to see what his next venture, if he continues with this storyline and brings maybe more characters in. So we'll see. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Athena.
Thanks, Hannah. And I really loved what you had to share. Hi, everyone. So I guess I'll just first just like introduce myself. Well, I share everyone's thoughts about the ending. I really enjoyed the book. I'm a literature major as well. And so I really love fiction. And I'm sort of ashamed, maybe embarrassed to say I've never read an Indigenous author's work. So this was really nice to read this perspective, and I am a true believer that representation matters, and I believe in like uplifting diverse voices and historically marginalized voices. So I'm just so excited about this event that centers around this like Native voice and a lot of these Native perspectives. I just wanted to touch on the theme of land, and I'm going to start with a quote, and there's a lot to unpack here. So it's Dean's part where he's about to go before the panel, and he gets there and he sees who he thinks is a white hipster, and he's, it's sort of this, the quote is this internal sort of dialogue he has with himself. And like I said, there's a lot to unpack. So hopefully this is coherent and not, and not a rant. But, first of all, he wonders to himself if you even have to be Native to get the grant. And like many of us here, most of the, Mutsun tribal members, I see themselves in a lot of different ways, in a lot of different aspects, and a lot of the characters in the context. And I, especially going into higher education, things like that. I'm a law student now. So I've definitely had so much experience applying for grants, scholarships, having to sort of prove yourself and tell your story. And so he gets there and he's like, sees this guy who he thinks is a white hipster. And he just wonders to himself, if you even have to be Native to get this grant. And the whole time leading up to it, he just sort of like has this self-consciousness. He says he always wondered if he smells like, piss is basically what he says. And so the feeling of like not being worthy, even for a grant that's supposed to be for Indigenous, like Native aspiring creators, is something I felt so many times, especially in higher education, needing this money and having to apply for it in that way. And then seeing your competition, someone who is, your privileged counterpart, and that's the first person he sees. And so, they start making conversation, and Dean asks if the guy is from there. And the guy responds, I mean, no one's really from here, right? And Dean says, I don't know what you mean. The other guy, Rob, says, you know what Gertrude Stein said about Oakland? And first of all, I think that this part I think it's really ironic, because this is a Native person who he's talking to, and a white man is recalling a white feminist, like very well-known words about what Oakland is. And so I just thought that was really interesting. And Dean shakes his head to him because he's been here before, where someone's telling him about like where he's from, or none of us are really from here. And here is this Indigenous person who actually very much has ties to the land, but that's out of his control at this point. So he doesn't even go into this. He doesn't even really respond to the guy. Probably, I mean, it's exhausting a lot of times to go into that detail about who you are, where you're from, what your real thoughts are about the connections to the land. So everything that ensues after that is more just like internal. And the quote is, he said he actually does know the quote very well. And he Googled the quote about Oakland when researching for the project. And it says, it's at the bottom of page 38. There is no there, he says in a kind of whisper, with this goofy open-mouthed smile Dean wants to punch. Dean wants to tell him he looked up the quote in its original context, in her Everybody's Autobiography, and found that she's talking about how the place where she'd grown up in Oakland had changed so much, that so much development had happened there, that the there of her childhood, the there was gone. There was no there anymore. Dean wants to tell him it's what happened to Native people. He wants to explain that they're not the same, that Dean is Native, born and raised in Oakland, from Oakland. Rob probably didn't look any further into the quote because he'd gotten what he wanted from it. He probably used the quote at dinner parties and made other people like him feel good about taking over neighborhoods they wouldn't have had the guts to drive through 10 years ago. And so I think a lot is going on in that quote, but I think in terms of its context to the land, I think it resonates so much with me because, I do think that people take what they want to about, popular literature or like very like famous authors. Like Gertrude Stein is well known. And so like what she said about Oakland is true. The way that cities like transform over the years, industrialization, like capitalism, gentrification, changes things to where they're unrecognizable even to like natives of the place. And in that context, natives could be anybody. It could be Gertrude Stein, anybody who's born and raised there. And that loss, even that has power. That is a powerful feeling. It's filled with emotion. But for someone who's Native, that carries even more weight because it's not just like the city that we were born and raised in is unrecognizable. It's that I know my ancestors cultivated this land and lived off of this land in harmony with the earth for thousands of years, even these stronger ties. And from there, what it looked like then, it's even more unrecognizable. So I think, especially given that like it's a reference to a white author, like a white, very popular author, it's a white man saying it to him. I think the criticism is very clear there. So I do you know, I've had a lot of those kind of conversations, and like, I resonate a lot with the character in that context. But I will say that you know, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that I think it was, I think it was a disservice when talking about like the fact that they're there for Native people, you know, that we don't have that. Like Oakland is definitely not that, like really no land is that for us anymore, you know, since contact. And, you know, for us, it was, you know, contact with the Spanish and the mission system and everything that ensued after that. But I think that in this context, I really do think that Tommy Orange missed an opportunity to call attention specifically to the people whose land Oakland is. And, you know, I think it's really important. It's really easy to talk about Native people as an umbrella term, to talk about Native rights or issues, or to talk about Indigenous issues and just lump us all together. But it's so incredibly important to use specific language and to acknowledge specific tribes when you can. So like here, definitely, I really would have loved to see acknowledgement that Oakland land belongs to the Muwekma tribe, the Ohlone tribe, and the Chochenyo tribe. So I really love this quote. I enjoyed the book, but I definitely think that certain tribes should have been named, and that we should use specific tribes and recognize how distinct and separate they are whenever we can. Thank you.
Thank you, Athena. Gonna switch gears now to my mother, Catherine. So I'll go ahead and if you want to say a few words and introduce yourself.
Mishmi Truhish, Kamakat, Catherine Dearheart, Amah Mutsun. Hello, relatives and friends and newcomers, and just happy to see all of your faces and to be here with you guys today to discuss Tommy Orange's book, There There.
Can you say your name?
My name's Catherine
Okay.
Rodriguez. I think I threw it in there quickly. I have my daughter right here mention it to me, but I am a tribal member. A little bit about my background. I grew up knowing that I was Native American, American Indian. I basically, with my parents, we lived off the land many years out of my life. We never lived off the system, maybe in the 80s when it got really difficult for my father if he was not working, what have you. But that's kind of when we went into the system as far as with welfare and so forth. But other than that, my father and my mother always provided food with gardening and hunting deer and making jerky and surviving life still in the 70s and the 80s. So I was still fortunate that I still had, I was still walking the Native path. And it kind of made a lot of connections with me, with the character, with Opal Viola Victoria Bearshield. I really connected with her because of her own path that she had. Was difficult for her. At a very young age, she lost her mother. Then she loses her sister to the system. And she becomes abandoned by her boyfriend or friend, Lucas. So I was really connected with her because I've lost my mother at a very young age. We weren't in the system, what have you, but just dealing with basic life and seeing other members having the difficulties with alcoholism or drug addiction, suicide, and so forth. So that brought me back to Opal, how she was responding to life, how she was responding, how to survive in this colonized world that we live in. I think with Opal, at a very young age, her mother, Victoria, was passing down the medicine to her as far as the spiritual medicine. And I think that's kind of where I want to discuss is Opal's spirituality. Opal was named after her grandmother, which was Opal Viola. And Opal Viola was a medicine woman and was a songkeeper of sacred song, which means in our tradition, all of the songs that we sing are sacred. They're prayers. Instead of saying a prayer in some sort of religion, it's actually when you sing a song, that's how we pray to Creator. So I really became fascinated with Opal in that instance, because I am a member of the Wishmaq Amah Mutsun singers, and we do sing sacred songs. But I do want to mention that we have barely started singing sacred songs of Amah Mutsun. It's been only 5 years that we've sung these sacred songs. But before that, they were illegal to even sing. So that also brings the ideas that if we're not singing our sacred songs, then we're not praying. So that is a very big disconnection in our spirituality when it's illegal to sing your sacred song, to do your tradition, your culture, and so forth. So that was one of the connections that I made with her. But I think also, too, speaking about Opal, she had a huge heart, and as far as the way she walked her life, you can tell that Creator was giving her a lot of medicine. And the medicine that I'm talking about is medicine of strength, courage, communication, role modeling, and all of these other attributes that in a really colonized way, we don't talk about that type of spirituality. That spirituality that we talk about is saying your prayers, your Our Fathers, or your Hail Marys. But the difference with Natives is that not only do we sing our sacred song, we also walk the medicine. We're walking with the medicine. As far as what Creator gives us, I think that's important for us to understand the difference between spirituality and living in our communities, of how we survive living in the colonized world. One example that I did want to go to is when Opal believes that spider legs came out of her leg as a child, and she was sort of afraid of it, but really didn't mention it. But the reason why I say this is because in our culture, she received the medicine from the spider. And this is from my perspective. The Spider Totem has 8 legs. 4 represent the 4 winds. The other 4 represent the 4 directions of life. The body itself has, most spiders, the bodies of spiders have the symbol of the infinity symbol. So for me, my spiritual life is every day, every hour, what I say, what I do, how I respond to people. And that's how I seen Opal, even though that she was quiet. She didn't say much, but she did a lot. She was the protector of the family at a very young age, when she protects her sister from probably being abused, or somehow when she attacks the mother's boyfriend, Ronald, with the bat, and how they leave his home after the death of her mother. So I think that was her first stand, where she's going to protect. The second thing also was, for me, when she starts protecting, is when she takes over to take care of her nephews, which become her grandsons, because her nephew's mother ODs. And so that alone is where she carries the medicine for family, to keep the medicine for the family together. After that, how she moves forward to holding down a full-time job. With that in mind, that when she holds down this full-time job, it's not just holding a full-time job, it's providing a home. They're no longer homeless. They're no longer going to shelter. There's warmth, there's water, there's basic needs now. And I think Opal's strength, her medicine, was providing all of that. And it was like, I would say maybe developing a path, because at that point, when she receives a message from her grandson, Orville, and he says on the phone that he found spider legs in his leg himself. And at that point, from my perspective, I thought that she was passing down the message of survival in this colonized world that we live in. Because, well, I'm gonna be honest, it's harder sometimes when we're not privileged. We don't have the access to education, transportation, childcare. Everything goes hand in hand. When something like that collapses in our path, it collapses everything. So prayer, strength, spirituality is, for me, is probably my life. To remember to pray, to keep strong, to keep strong, and as far as to give that path to the next family member, to teach them to survive in this colonized world. And with that, I'm going to kind of stop there, and I'm going to go ahead and pass it to, who's that? Julissa.
Thank you. I'll be wrapping this up for this evening, and then we can go into Q&A. But thank you, cousins, for sharing. It's always funny, like Lisa said, like we're all related, so we just all are, you're like either your cousin or like your cousins, or you're like close, so there's just there's layers. But yeah, so my name's Julissa Lopez, and I'm a tribal member. I am also a UCSC alum. And I remember seeing Carolyn there at the EOP office when I was on campus as an undergrad. And I'm currently a graduate student at the University of Michigan. So I'm getting my PhD in social psychology. So the part of the book that I think I want to leave us with today is on page 137. And so it starts off, the wound that was made when white people came and took all that they took has never healed. An unattended wound gets infected, becomes a new kind of wound, like the history of what actually happens becomes a new kind of history. All these stories that we haven't been telling all this time, that we haven't been listening to, are just a part of what we need to heal. Not that we're broken, and don't make the mistake of calling us resilient. To not have been destroyed, to not have given up, to have survived is no badge of honor. Would you call an attempted murder victim resilient? And so there's two parts of this that I think are really important to point out. First is just the introduction of this, what we consider like a soul wound, right? This wound that just becomes infected. And you might also think about it as intergenerational trauma, historical trauma. It's just trauma has been passed down through the generations. And when we were, doing our discussions just in our group, Lisa had mentioned that all of these characters in the book, we can think about a family member. All of the experiences, the addiction, incarceration, violence, we can think about our own lived experiences. And I think that's what was most special for me, is just to finally see a book that reflected my experiences when I thought that no one really could relate to that. But what's even more important is the second part where he's talking about, we're not broken, don't call us resilient. And so I think that's really important to think about, because I was never ashamed growing up of my family history. If anything, I never saw it as a weakness. I thought, if anything, it made us stronger. And so when people would hear our stories or learn about, our histories, they often feel pity for us or feel bad. And that's something I think personally, like, I hate that feeling, like someone feeling bad for me. It just feels very awkward and uncomfortable. And I think the book is written in a way that's not meant to be like a sad story. And I was like researching before and watching YouTube videos of some book talks Tommy Orange has done, and a white woman comes up during the Q&A and she asks him, was it intended for the characters to have such despairing and sad lives? Like, is that something about Oakland? And I was like, wow, like that's such an interesting analysis. Like, that's what she took from the book, and he just kind of smiles and he said, I don't think they're sad, like that's not something I would describe my book as. And if someone told me I had a sad life, I would be sad about that, it just kind of ends there. Like, there's no, yeah, so I just think that was very interesting. So if you're coming to this book with, without these lived experiences, I wouldn't want you all to go away with like that we have sad lives, that you should feel bad for us. If anything, you should be really thinking critically about ways to support us, uplift our voices, and learn more about our efforts to reconnect and empower our people despite these soul wounds. Learn about how this made us stronger, and that's really what I'm hoping people can focus on. But yeah, I think that was the big takeaway for me, is just finally feeling like I was seen. Yeah, so that's what I just want to leave everybody with.
Yes, thank you, Julissa, for ending us on that note. And thank you to the panelists. Thank you, everyone, for joining the conversation. I think we're going to open it up for Q&A now. And I think, Laura, you're going to help out with that part.
Yes, I will. Thank you so much again to all of you. That was really super illuminating and interesting, and really moving. So as we've done in previous ones, we'll just open it up to questions. You're welcome to raise your hand, put a question in the chat. I'm seeing one right here that we could start with, about the spider legs. There's still some uncertainty around the spider legs. Carla has a question. Elena has a question. Or I guess Carla's is a comment, but Elena is saying, I'm still not sure about the spider legs. I heard an interview where Tommy Orange said it had really happened to him. I understand the symbolism, but confused if this is a common occurrence. Could someone speak to that?
Well, I don't think I would have considered it a common occurrence, because it's kind of what Catherine spoke about, and Julissa is, and I think I referred to a little bit too, is, we kind of believe that everyone has a purpose, and that things come to us because I guess Creator or our ancestors feel that we're capable of that responsibility, or for passing on that knowledge, or whatever it is that they intend for us. So, some people could say that the spiders maybe were a metaphor, but I know for us, no, we believe it's a spider. and then that he has those legs have purpose, and they mean something to us. So I don't know how to make other people think and necessarily understand that. I can tell you that, if people sweat, or you're in the roundhouse, or you dream, a lot of things can come to us, and you have to interpret those messages, and you're either the right person for it. It's a gift, or it's just Creator using you for that. So to try to be literal, I don't think you can be literal with it, I guess. I don't know, ladies, you want to chime in with that, but I wouldn't look at it that literally.
If I can add, the totem for the spider, and also I want to say every Indigenous nation believes differently. So it's not just because what I'm saying, that's the straightforward, that's the whole definition. It doesn't work like that with us because each nation has a different way or thought of it. But with the spider medicine, it is a metaphor where it represents patience and believing that you can overcome any challenges in your life, like Opal did. She experienced death at a young age. Her sister is lost in the system. Her love life, she's abandoned. All of those challenges she was able to overcome. So that spider was actually, when the spider makes the web, it's actually a strength. Where, how many times do you see a spider web on your fence and you shoot it down with water? The pressure of water alone will not knock down that spider web. And I'm sure many of you guys have experienced that. So the medicine of the spider is in actuality living out how to overcome our challenges, how to be receptive to what's happening in our path, and trying to survive that issue, that time in our life.
Yeah. Also, sorry for the background noise. Our dogs are saying hello if you could hear them. But I wanted to add on to that, when Orville, when the spider legs come out of his leg, like I took that as a metaphor of like now the medicine is being passed down from Opal's generation to the next generation. So yeah, I just wanted to add that.
And so then can I ask a question? So then when it's passed down then to Orville, then that's a sign, you read that as a sign of sort of strength continuing, right? Or like, yeah, perfect. That's so interesting. There's a hand up. Would you like to ask your question?
That might be me, Anna. Thank you so much. This is a question for Catherine. I loved hearing you talk about prayer as a song. And I was curious, are the songs, are they individual? Are they part of a community? Are they set and passed on? And would you maybe be comfortable sharing a little bit of a song with us so we could hear the language? I don't know if that's appropriate or not, but.
The songs that we sing are sacred. They've been here for thousands and thousands of years. And the way it was explained to me from my elders was when there was not a time of sound pollution, that us, our ancestors, were able to hear the sounds that Creator was sending us. It's rhythmic and so forth. So that's part of the beginning. The difference between natives from Ohlone is that our sacred songs actually has language in it too. So our language, our song is, it's quite difficult. It's not easy to sing. So our young ones they're sponges. They can pick up the language quickly. Because I'm still considered colonized, where I had to really do a lot of praying in order to receive the medicine from sacred song. So when we are in prayer, when we're in ceremony, when we are sweating or what have you, it is important that you cannot just go in there and start singing and so forth. You have to be at that place in your heart when it's open, kan, where your heart is open to Creator. And I always say that when I do start singing, I always ask that Creator to stand with me, because I come to Creator with all of my negative way of life too. And to be in song, you have to be in prayer, in the prayer life, to sing song. So, and you have to be clearly respective, where you have to be sober. You have to walk the red road. There's protocols also to sing sacred song. You cannot be ministrating on your moon when you're singing. So there's a lot of there's a lot of protocols that go along with sacred song.
There's a question for Julissa from Angela Elsie, who's asking this in the chat. For the last speaker, Julissa, who was surprised that Orange was asked about the sad/tragic portrayal of the Oakland Native community in the book, could you talk about whether you felt this portrayal was accurate?
I guess I'm assuming like the sadness accurate, that sad portrayal.
I think so, yeah.
I guess, I mean, sad things happened. I don't know if I would say they are sad. I don't know really how to make that distinction well, and feel free anyone else to jump in, because I'm sure you all relate to what I was saying at the end, tribal members. Yeah, I mean, as far as like for my own personal lived experience, it felt very accurate as far as like just recognizing the humanity of people, that you can both have bad and good in you. Because I think a lot of times we think, oh, this person does a bad thing, so they're a bad person, but we don't always think about why they ended up in the situation in the first place, and what are the good things they come with too. So I feel like it did a really great job at like accurately showing the full humanity of the person, rather than just, this is the bad character, or this is the, the villain in this story. I didn't really feel like there was a villain. I feel like there was a lot of people that were just, I don't want to call them victims, but they were just people that were dealing with what they were dealt with, right, in their lives. So for me, I felt empowered while reading it. I never felt sad, I think, throughout it. I was just really excited, like, oh my God, like I can relate to this. I think a lot of times growing up and then going into higher ed, you assume like your peers don't share the same experiences of you, like I feel weird telling them about my experiences sometimes. So it's just nice to be like, this is real life, and it's okay to have a life like this, and you can still be okay. And so in that part, I feel like it's accurate. But as far as the sadness, I didn't. Of course, the ending is a sad ending, but it's not like their lives are sad, despairing lives. Like that kind of like, that hurts a little bit if people think about our lives as despairing. But yeah, that's kind of, I would love to hear if anybody else has thoughts about that.
I just wanted to comment on that really quick. I agree with everything you said, Julissa, and I do think that the characters are complex, and I think that it's really important to, like Julissa said, like walk away with this without projecting everything you learned in the book onto like Native people as a whole, just in terms of, just in the way that we approach historically marginalized communities and wanting to advocate for them. The very first thing you can do, like, is to not think of those separate and distinct communities as monoliths, and not like ascribe certain qualities or like emotions to us. Like, we all have overcome incredible adversity. And yes, there is like generational trauma. Yes, we do have a sad past that was imposed on us that we did not choose, but our lives are not sad. And so, I think in the one sense, I was really appreciative that we were able to read this Indigenous author and just have that representation, and that he's, gotten this book as, you know, so highly regarded and gotten, you know, all these accolades. That's amazing. And I hope that more Indigenous voices can come forward. However, at the same time, I hope that in the future, we can tell our stories without having to include, you know, the sad parts and, you know, the part, this is what happened to us. And yes, that is our part of our story, but it's just a part of it. Like, we are all very diverse, multifaceted, complex individuals, and we enjoy very like lighthearted and beautiful things. And, you know, just like everybody else does. And, you know, we have lives that, you know, apart from all of that sadness, you know, if you look at just our culture, it's beautiful, and we derive so much joy and so much purpose from what Creator instilled in us, and what our, you know, the values that our ancestors carried on, and the culture that our ancestors carried on. And a lot of that, most of it, has nothing to do with violence and sadness. It is like very beautiful, and it's about protecting the earth and living in harmony with it. And so I think that, you know, maybe it's not inaccurate to look at those characters and like think of sadness, but I would also challenge everyone to look at other parts of those characters, whether or not they're really highlighted or not. And I would also, in addition to that, challenge everyone to not, you know, impose that view or those stereotypes onto other Native people you encounter, and to realize that so much of our story really doesn't have to do with violence and sadness. Like, we do live these beautiful, you know, diverse lives just as individuals, and also, you know, collectively.
Thank you.
Awesome. Was there anyone else who wanted to speak to that? No? Okay, just making sure. Carrie had a question about land in the chat. And she says, so much of this novel seems to be about trying to find a sense of belonging in an urban setting following relocation. I think this is, you know, something that Carolyn was talking about in her opening. Carrie continues, as Amah Mutsun Tribal Band members, how important is it to you to live close to the tribal land as a way to connect to one another and maintain a sense of belonging?
I can go first, and then if anybody else wants to add. But it's extremely important that tribal, like, well, our Indigenous community, that we do connect to our land, but that all Native Indigenous people connect to their land, because the land, it is a part of the culture, and it is a part of our traditions. You know, even just when we connect with land, we're connecting with our culture. Like, even if it's the language, the way we describe the land, or the names that we have, like for our sacred site that I mentioned earlier, that we're protecting Uristock. And so Uristock itself, like that's a landmark that has its own name, an Amah Mutsun name, in the Mutsun language. And so by us connecting to the land, you know, we're connecting with our language, we're connecting with our traditions, the way we manage the land. And also being coastal natives, I think I saw this earlier in the question about Ohlone, you know, what's the difference? And colonizers, especially the missionaries, they said all natives in California along the coast were Ohlone or Costanoan. So it was like a generalization that they put on all coastal people. So when we connect to our land, that generalization is gone, because now it's individual to our community. And so it's a space where our community can gather and can connect. And not just only are we connecting with ourselves and like with my cousins, but we're also connecting with our ancestors that have managed the land and took care of the land since forever. And so, yeah, so I think just it's important, and it's a part of our identity, and it's a part of our spirituality as well. And so that's why we're actively trying to protect our sacred sites and connect with our land.
If I can add, it's also the connection with our ancestors in our own spirituality, because some of us, like I'm a guest on Chichansi land. I'm down here in the valley, and I know within my heart that I belong in Amah Mutsun territory. So with that, you lose sort of your spirituality, because you're not with your ancestors, you're not taking care of your land, you're not doing your responsibility. And it is our responsibility to take care of Amah Mutsun territory, to take care of all the people who now and lives in our territory, and to be the voice to protect, to love, to care, and all of those things. It's a whole big, huge belief system, how we're connected to the land. So it's most importantly, that's how we survive. If we don't take care of the land, then what will happen to us and along with the other people, just like we went through the fire, these fires that were so, near and so forth in the coastal area, that fire was a cleansing of the land, because fire is important. Fire brings the birth of new plants, the birth of life. And without the land, how will we survive?
Well, just to speak so that everyone understands is, our tribe is made up of what we would consider 3 major lineages. And of those lineages, we have a part of our family that resides in like the Madera, Fresno area. Then we have another part of our tribe that migrated and are in the Monterey, Pacific Grove, Carmel area. And then there's another larger portion of us that are in the Bay Area, as I stated in my part of the talk. And I can't explain to you the difficulty it is that comes with all of us being so separated. And, every time we want to meet, one part of our tribe is driving 2, 3, 4 hours in order for us all to be together and share, ceremony, our culture, or just, having a meeting about our community as a whole. And so it's just so important that we have a place where we can go and be together. And right now we don't have that. And so it creates a lot of separation between us. And sometimes, it's made it difficult because people are seeking knowledge from different areas, where if we were all together, I guess you could say there'd be one voice, one general consensus of who we are and how we deal with our culture and participate in it. So it makes it very challenging. And then as, Catherine said, I mean, it's just, I get very frustrated that I have to constantly ask permission to gather because I don't have my own place to do it, right? So for us to gather and feel good about it, I have to drive an hour and a half to go pick my willow and my mugwort and those things, to know that it's from my land, from my ancestors, where I'm from. Otherwise, I have to ask permission. And that's, quite honestly, it's not healthy. That's just not how we are supposed to live. So we have the challenges of the past and what happened to us, but we have real modern day, issues about where we are and that sense of belonging. Because I know all of my cousins here, there's nothing, I can't even explain to you the feelings and that overcomes you. It can be overwhelming to be on our land. That sense of belonging and the beauty that we see in it that maybe other people don't, but that it's an indescribable feeling of being home, and being connected. And when you don't have it, it's honestly, it's just devastating. It really is.
There are a couple of questions in the chat about the original area of the Amah Mutsun. Carolyn, you're responding to that, correct?
Yeah, I just put in there, it's like, because we come from different lineages, I would say, like, if you're looking at a map, like from Santa Cruz, like all the way down to Gilroy, like the whole area. And even our creation story was in San Jose on not San Jose, but Mount Umunum, like in that area. So, yeah, I mean, I wish I had a map right now, but I would say like the whole, Santa Clara, is that the?
Santa Clara, Morgan Hill, Moss Landing. We're part of.
We go as far inland as Los Banos, inland, and then down to the area that they're talking about. But I think what everyone has to understand is, we were made up of all, I think in all there's like 200, don't quote me, I need to check for sure, but we were made up of many, many little tribelets that shared a language. So, I can trace my ancestry back to specific villages that I belong to. So to narrow it completely down to like, oh, if you're on Highway 5 here and there, we moved around also. So even within the modern day tribes, that we consider modern day tribes, we have shared territory because our people migrated up and down the rivers, and then inland. So it's kind of difficult to speak about it in modern terms, but what Carolyn said is true. I mean, from the coast and then as far in as Los Banos.
Thank you for that. There's also a question about federal recognition. Could someone speak?
I actually just talked to Val about this, if it's okay if I answer.
Mm-hmm.
Val said that because it's always important to get our story right, and if someone else is telling it, it's very important. So I actually came across language on a different organization's website that said we never had federal recognition. So I actually went to our tribe's chairperson and asked him about that, and he said it's not very accurate, and it's, again, unfortunately, one of those situations where we signed in 1851, the Amah Mutsun signed a treaty with the federal government. This treaty was vigorously opposed by the state of California, and so the treaty was never ratified with the federal government. For this reason, the Amah Mutsun are a federally unrecognized tribe and not eligible to hold land in a tribal trust.
What year was the treaty again, Athena?
1851, Val said.
1851. Interesting. Thank you. I know there's a hand, and I keep not getting your name, and I apologize.
Oh, that's okay. My question was about federal recognition, because working for EPA, I mean, that makes all the difference. So is it true that right now the tribe has not been recognized by the federal government? And are there steps that can be taken to take care of that? Or, I mean,
so there are many, many tribes in California and across the United States who are seeking federal recognition. This could be a whole topic on its own about the laborious, what we would consider inaccurate and unfair way that they classify us as Native people and where we belong and who we are. But the process itself, there are 7 criteria in which a tribe has to meet in order to be recognized. And there's an incredible amount of paperwork involved and dollars to support that research that makes it just almost impossible. And if you know, it's pretty rare nowadays for any tribe to be recognized. And honestly, it depends on the political climate and who's in charge at the time. So I would say over the last 4 years, probably not the best time for us, but we have been on this quest for federal recognition for 20 something years as a formal government. And the policies, the criteria, they change quite a bit. So we, as a tribe, while yes, that is our ultimate goal, I mean, we want to be federally recognized, but we've decided to put our energy into our land trust and find other ways to ascertain land, because we know we cannot depend on the government to do that for us and grant that for us. It's just not, I don't know that it would happen in my lifetime. So we just feel like it's a credible amount of money and energy when we could be doing other things. It's always there. We always entertain the different opportunities that come our way, but it's not our everyday priority and focus at this point. It's just too frustrating.
That certainly makes sense. I wonder if I could ask a question. When we were talking in our meeting about the event, you all were talking about, we were talking about the fact that our panelists were all women. And then Lisa, you were starting to talk about the role of women in the tribe. I wonder if you all could speak to that. And maybe too how it connects to the novel as well.
Well, I think in preparation for this salon, we'd had some conversation with you and with my cousins about us being a matriarchal society. You know, our tribe is the women. I mean, we currently have a male chairperson, but you know, getting it done is by the women in our tribe, and it's not uncommon. And in each of our lineages in our family, we've had very strong female leaders always, and it's continuing, as you can see with our younger people. I mean, look at the education and the career pursuits of just my four younger cousins and what they're doing, and that's just, I'm not going to say it's expected, but it's who we are. I mean, you know, the women lead in our tribe. It just, I don't know that I can explain it. I don't know if the other ladies want to speak to it, but you know, there's a lot of reasons, and Julissa would be the better person to speak to this, about our men being robbed of their masculinity, and you know, their confidence and their self-esteem and their worth due to the circumstances, you know, from one generation to the other. And it still unfortunately exists, but we do have a lot of young male youth coming up in our tribe that I think consciously as women, we're not going to allow them to have those same experiences that our ancestors did. I don't know if Julissa, you want to add to that? Or?
No, yeah, I mean, I completely agree. I think about my own upbringing and how strong the women were and influential in my own life. And it makes me sad to think about the absence of our men. I feel like a lot of times they were taken from us for a variety of reasons, like early deaths, incarceration. And so it's unfortunate, but I have so much hope. Like Lisa said, like our young men are really strong, and I have a lot of hope that we won't be in this position for long. But I don't think it's anything unique to, well, I don't want to say, like with all that we've said, it doesn't apply to all tribes or all nations, you know, but it is, I think, it's not that unique to us, in that there are these matriarchal societies in Indigenous communities, and even our society was matriarchal pre-contact. And so we really are like just culturally the protectors, the leaders. And so it'll be beautiful when we get to a point where we have a woman chair, which I think, you know, in a few generations we should be there now within our generation.
Mm-hmm. There's an interesting comment in the chat. Oh, now it's moving. Susan is saying that there's an interesting contrast, that this panel is all women and the book was primarily about men. I wonder if we could even turn that into a question. And do you all think that the book is primarily about men?
No, I didn't get that at all. I don't know about the others, but there were such strong women in this book. I mean, you know, Opal, Jackie, I mean, I don't know how you guys, I mean, I did not take that from the book at all. I felt like the women were upholding the men and the caretakers of them in the book.
I wanted to add a little bit onto that. Yeah, I agree with Lisa. I didn't feel like it was masculine heavy or dominant. I felt like there were really strong characters like Opal, even Blue, a bunch of female characters, and it reminded me a lot, like Lisa and I think Julissa said, it's like we can take any of those characters and say that was my family, or I know someone in my family. So it's just, that was very interesting. And as we were talking a little bit about gender, I was thinking about at the end, and please correct me with my comprehension, sometimes it's not the best, but at the end, isn't it all the men that get shot? Or was there, and there's no women that got shot? So I thought that was very interesting, as well. And then the women were taking care of the men. Blue went to go take care of everyone. So that was very interesting as well, and made me kind of think and reflect as well on that part.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I mean, Blue literally carries Edwin, who's really large,
Yes.
we know, the whole way.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Correct.
That's so interesting. It's such a great point.
If I can also add something, the way we were brought up was we honor our men. And us as women, we help our men find their source, whatever they're looking for, whatever they are trying to reach for, whatever livelihood they're trying to reach, their education or what have you. So we help them find their source. And in turn, the men help protect us, because being around all of my male cousins, they have always been right there to protect. Even as a little girl going to school, the whole school knew all of our male cousins, and we were protected at a very young age, going through elementary, high school, what have you. Our cousins knew that they were to protect us, because I grew up in an all-female family. It was 9 girls. So that's the kind of way how I look at male figures. We honor our men, and our men honor us.
Yeah, I can honestly, like Catherine, say that growing up in the Bay Area, in my age group, there were a solid 11, 12 of us that went through elementary, junior high, and high school together. And we were very protective of each other, very close, all of us, and really thought of ourselves more as siblings than cousins, because our families, just like the incident with Opal raising her sister, her half-sister's grandchildren, in my family, in my household, we raised, a younger cousin. My mom and dad raised a younger cousin. And many times different relatives and children lived in my house, because it was a 2-parent household. And that just wasn't uncommon for us to take care of each other in that way and be protectors of us. And the one thing I can say is that for us, it was never about being female or male. It was, if you do it. And that's everything from sports to whatever it was that we were doing. We didn't really focus on gender in my family in that way. You had the talents and the capabilities, and so that's what you did. So I don't really know if we would say that that's unique to Native people, but when you talk to others, it does feel that that's a pretty common thread amongst us.
That's really interesting. I saw one question. It's just more sort of factual information about the tribe, which we seem to be interested in. How large? How many members?
We have about, I would say, 800 active members, but in every one of our lineages, we have whole families that are not officially members of our tribe. They're of our community, meaning they just honestly don't have the money for their birth certificates and all the things that we need to meet the federal government's criteria to be a tribe. And so we're probably 1,500 strong.
We have 1 minute left. If there are any more, I don't know if the panel, if you all, the speakers, want to say any final things that you want to leave us with, if you have anything. I'll leave it open for a minute.
I'll just close in saying that I hope that by spending this, 90 minutes with us, that you do realize we're not victims and we do not want to be pitied. And we are thriving. Our tribe is thriving.
Do we have time to, my mother had an idea to end with Opal's prayer.
Mm-hmm.
So if we could read that. But unless there's any other tribal member that wants to, any last words, but I think overall, I think we're happy to be here and happy to share with you all our experiences and also engage in this conversation with you all. So thank you for having us. But yeah, I don't know, I guess I could just pass it to the prayer.
This prayer was written in the book. It's called the Horse Prayer, and it was discussed with Opal. Upon suffering beyond the red nation shall rise again, and it shall be a blessing for the sick world, a world filled with broken promises, selfishness, and separations, a world longing for light again. I see a time of 7 generations when all the colors of making will gather under the sacred tree of life, and the whole earth will become one circle again. Himiaho.
Thank you so much. Again, this was wonderful. We will send out emails, and people are really interested in the petition. So just letting everyone know that I'll send that out to the group. And perhaps we'll talk about other ways that, that the local community can support the tribe. So thank you so much again. And we hope to see everyone next Wednesday, March 3rd at 6:30, where Mika Parks, Professor of Literature, is going to be in conversation with Tommy Orange. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a lovely, lovely evening. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you, Laura.
Thank you, Lisa, so much.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.